It's been a busy day at the state capitol as just a few moments ago we brought you live here on Fox 35 News Plus, the governor signing into law the new immigration proposals just passed by the legislature today. Joining us live now via Zoom is Representative Anna Eskamani from Orlando. And Representative Eskamani, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you so much for having me and for providing coverage on this breaking news and important story.
So Democrats today spoke at length, asking during debate on the floor of the House, on the floor of the Senate this morning. I just want to get your initial reaction to the passage of these bills and now them already being signed into law by the governor.
Well, their passage was not surprising when the special session was called. Most folks might remember that there's been debate and infighting within the Republican caucus over this issue, trying to out-Trump each other. Unfortunately, this final product is very concerning as it pertains to our dreamers. These are our college students who came to this country no choice of their own and have qualified for in-state tuition that is now going to be taken away from these students. And of course, part of this bill also forces the entanglement of local law enforcement to federal immigration enforcement, which we're very concerned that the ripple effect of that will be everyday people not engaging with law enforcement to help stop crimes and really create an environment where we are all less safe.
You mentioned the in-state tuition. That was one of the provisions that got a lot of debate and a lot of pushback in the House and in the Senate. I know there were amendments to kind of allow that to the in-state tuition rate to continue for those who are kind of already in school. Why do you think an amendment like that was not successful?
Well, honestly, I think it's just because of a position that the governor was taking. I mean, there were many Republican lawmakers that agreed with us in not eliminating in-state tuition. For those who don't remember, this actually was a bipartisan initiative 10 years ago. And these students were promised that if you work hard and you study and you go to a public high school, that you'll have a path forward with in-state tuition to reach your fullest potential to achieve that American dream. And today that promise was broken purely based on political preference. It wasn't something that was evidence-based or really any clear explanation. It's really an effort to be punitive for the sake of being punitive for these children not having a traditional regulated documentation status. And it's heartbreaking because now these kids are likely going to be unable to finish their higher educational experiences. And we are, of course, looking at other alternatives like fundraising from the private sector to help support them however we can, because these really are some of the best and brightest kids in the state. And it's a shame that they're getting caught up in this political fight.
One of the other provisions that got a lot of attention and debate is the mandatory death penalty provision for illegal immigrants convicted of capital offenses. I know there were a lot of questions about whether even a provision like that would be constitutional.
It's clearly not. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the right don't really care about issues being constitutional or not, but it's very clear that mandating capital punishment based on origin is unconstitutional. Lady Justice is blind. She does not see your identity when making decisions in a court of law about the level of punishment a crime will lead to. And this clearly is a slap in the face to that standard. And so I do suspect there'll be litigation on this component and it will not be deemed constitutional. And in the similar vein, that legislation, it also creates a carve out for those who benefited from the Cuban Adjustment Act, something called an affirmative defense. It basically means that some of the new punishments established in that law could potentially not apply to someone who could use in their defense the fact that they benefited from the Cuban Adjustment Act, which is why I filed legislation to expand that protection to the Venezuelan community. And one of my other colleagues filed an amendment to expand to the Haitian community. Of course, those amendments both failed, but I find it really frustrating and ironic that the legislature is willing to carve out a very specific group of individuals while ignoring others who've experienced oppressive regimes, communist government alongside political turmoil.
Republican leaders and the governor at the bill signing just a little bit ago talked about how this legislation will make Florida families safer and more secure. How do you respond to folks who say this crackdown, these provisions needed to happen for safety reasons?
Well, I can respond by letting folks know that after having conversations with the Orange County Sheriff, with the Orlando Police Department, with the Winter Park Police Department, that all of these local agencies stressed to me that they're focused on violent crimes and violent crime prevention and accountability, regardless of who commits them. So there's always been a focus of law enforcement to go after criminals, regardless of their origin to this state. And there is a concern that when you put federal responsibilities and federal immigration enforcement on our local officers, that not only does it add more to their plate in the sense of what they need to focus on to keep us safe, but it also erodes the trust between local law enforcement and diverse communities. So I'm actually very concerned that this ripple effect we're seeing is going to create an environment where if you witness a crime or experience a crime, that you'll be less likely to report that for fear of it leading to detention and deportation. And to be clear, we already have situations right now of individuals where charges were dropped. They were charged incorrectly, and now they're being detained by ICE because of past incorrect charges. So we are facing an unprecedented environment where even children are scared to talk to their school resource officers for fear of their immigration status being questioned. And that's just not a healthy environment that we should be governing in. It's not one the legislature should be proud of.
The governor said, buckle up. A lot of things are going to be happening very quickly. What are your concerns in the coming days as this law is implemented, as these enforcement actions begin to take place?
I think the biggest shift you're going to see is private prison stocks go up and private prisons open up across Florida as detention centers. So before there's any type of mass deportation, there's mass detention. And so I do suspect that we'll see the profits of private prisons rise as different detention centers are open across the state. And I'm also very concerned about hardworking Floridians with unregulated status, including those who recently lost their TPS due to an administrative decision out of the White House, are going to get caught up in this legal system. And despite the fact that they've committed no crimes, again, having TPS was a process that was granted to them that's now been eliminated, that they're going to find themselves in a process of detention and potential deportation, which also impacts our economy. We have to remember that our three largest economic sectors, from tourism and agriculture to construction, are very reliant on immigrant labor. And if we're worried about the cost of tomatoes or the cost of housing, get ready for those expenses to continue to increase with policies like this going into effect.
Last thing I'll ask you here, Representative Eskamani, and that is that, we know the special session has ended, but we're just weeks away from the regular session. Is there anything in the works to push back against some of these new provisions and things that are now law when it comes to the regular session in just a couple of weeks?
Well, I have no doubt that these debates will continue. At the same time, I'm hopeful that we can pivot back to everyday issues that impact all Floridians, from property insurance reform to the cost of rent, to the cost of food, to the need for more public transportation. As someone who cares deeply about the homelessness crisis, I want to see us champion issues that will lift up families from poverty, that will really ensure that every person has a chance to reach their fullest potential. And so we'll be focusing on public education, environmental protection, corporate accountability, and hopefully not have the continuation of these partisan battles, because the people of Florida need us to solve these problems, not create new ones.
Representative Anna Eskamani from Orlando, we appreciate your time this afternoon, and thanks for joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you for having me.